Please, please don't go in there," Melissa screamed, her voice trembling as she pointed toward the classroom door. The old lights in the hallway flickered wildly, throwing shadows that danced across the cracked walls. Inside, they could still hear the lecturer's voice, calm, deep, and eerily steady, echoing through the speakers. But the problem was, the new lecturer had been dead for weeks. Jake's hand shook as he turned the knob, the sound of metal screeching making everyone flinch. The classroom was cold, unnaturally cold, and the smell, like wet earth and old blood, filled the air. Papers floated across the floor, and on the whiteboard, written in jagged red letters, were the words, "Class is in session. Forever." Then came the sound of footsteps, slow, heavy, dragging footsteps. Out of the shadows stepped the new lecturer, Professor Warren, his pale face split with a crooked grin. One of his eyes was missing, the other glowed faintly white. "Didn't anyone tell you?" he said in a hollow voice. "Attendance is mandatory." Before anyone could move, the door slammed shut, locking them all inside. The projector turned on by itself, showing blurry footage of their own faces sitting in class. Except in the video, they were all lifeless, heads tilted at the same eerie angle. Melissa screamed again. The lights went out. And then, everything went silent. Earlier that week, Lincoln University was just like any other college, loud, crowded, and full of students dragging themselves through boring classes. The psychology department was buzzing that Monday morning because a new lecturer was starting. His name was Professor Harold Warren, a man rumored to have taught at several Ivy League schools before mysteriously disappearing for a few years. "Guess the guy's trying to make a comeback," Jake joked to his friend Melissa as they hurried across the campus lawn. Melissa laughed. Or maybe he's just broke. But when they entered the lecture hall, the laughter stopped. Professor Warren stood at the front, dressed in an old brown suit that looked decades out of style. His hair was thin and gray, his face pale like he hadn't seen the sun in years. Yet, his voice was powerful, calm, slow, and strangely hypnotic. "Welcome, students," he said with a faint smile. "In this class, we'll explore the depths of the human mind. But remember, the mind can be a dangerous place." No one laughed, not even Jake. As the lecture continued, odd things started to happen. The projector flickered on and off without anyone touching it. The temperature in the room dropped suddenly, making students rub their arms. And when Warren turned to write on the board, some swore his reflection in the glass didn't move with him. "After class," Melissa whispered, "did you notice his hands?" Jake frowned. "What about them?" "They were black, like burned." Jake shrugged it off, but later that evening, when he passed by the lecture hall again, he saw something that made his stomach twist. Professor Warren was still inside, talking to an empty classroom. Except it wasn't empty. Through the window, Jake saw shapes sitting in the chairs, faint, gray outlines of students who weren't really there. And when Warren turned, Jake could swear he smiled directly at him. The next morning, 2 students didn't show up for class. The college assumed they skipped, but their dorms were empty, phones left behind, beds unmade. By the 3rd day, whispers spread across campus. The new lecturer is cursed. People disappear after his class. He used to teach at Westbridge University until the fire. Jake decided to check that rumor. Late that night, he searched online and froze. There had been a fire at Westbridge in the psychology department 8 years ago. The cause was unknown. Professor Harold Warren had been listed among the dead. Jake's heart raced. If that was true, then who was teaching them now? The next day, Jake, Melissa, and 2 other classmates, Danny and Clara, decided to confront him. They waited until after the last class, sneaking down the hallway toward the lecture room. The door creaked open slightly. The projector was on again, flickering. On the screen, they saw themselves standing in that exact hallway. "Is this Liv?" Clara whispered. Then, from inside the dark classroom, a voice said softly, "I told you, curiosity kills." The projector light flashed bright white. The door slammed shut. Jake screamed. Something grabbed his leg from the darkness. Jake kicked hard, trying to break free from whatever was gripping his leg. The thing's skin felt cold and slimy, like a dead fish. Melissa grabbed his arm, screaming, "Pull him up! Pull him up!" as Clara and Danny tugged with all their strength. When Jake finally slipped free, they all stumbled backward, gasping for air. The door behind them slammed shut again, bang, sealing them inside. The classroom was pitch black now except for the faint blue glow from the projector. On the screen, the video kept playing. It showed the 4 of them standing in the same spot, but in the video version, they weren't moving. Their eyes were wide open, and blood was running down their faces. "What is this?" Danny whispered. "What the hell is this?" Then came the footsteps again. Slow, dragging. Closer. Out of the darkness, Professor Warren appeared, his figure barely visible. His head tilted at an unnatural angle as he stared at them. "Why are you still here?" he asked softly, his voice deep and echoing, almost as if more than one person was speaking at the same time. Class was over. Jake stepped forward, his voice shaking. "Who are you?" Warren smiled faintly. "Once, I was like you. Curious. Foolish. I wanted to understand fear. I thought I could teach it. But fear," he took a step closer, "taught me instead." Suddenly, the classroom lights flickered back on, and everyone froze. The students who had gone missing were sitting in the front row. Their heads were tilted forward, eyes open but lifeless. Their skin was pale, and their lips were gray. Each one wore the same expression, silent terror frozen in time. Melissa screamed and stumbled backward into a desk. Jake's heart hammered. "Oh my God, they are dead." Warren's eyes rolled white. "No, they are learning. Forever." The lights went out again. The air grew thick, like the room itself was breathing. On the board, red letters began appearing on their own. Lesson 2, never question the dead. "Run!" Jake shouted. They bolted toward the door, but it wouldn't open. Clara pounded on it. Danny threw a chair. Nothing. Then, from the projector, a distorted voice whispered, "Sit down." The sound made the walls tremble. The projector screen started bleeding, thick, dark liquid dripping down its surface, forming the shape of a hand that reached out toward them. Melissa screamed as the hand pulled itself free from the screen, stretching and twisting until it became a shadow figure. Its face looked like melted wax, with no eyes or mouth, but it let out a horrible, gurgling sound that made everyone cover their ears. Jake grabbed a metal chair and swung it through the air. The shadow burst apart like smoke, but it wasn't gone. It slipped across the floor, reforming near Melissa's feet. She stumbled backward, tripped over a desk, and hit her head hard. "Melissa!" Jake yelled. He dropped down beside her, shaking her shoulders, but she didn't move. Warren's voice came again, calm and cold. "Every student learns at their own pace." Jake looked up and saw Warren holding something in his hand. It was an old, burned student ID card. The name on it was Harold Warren. Danny's voice broke through the air. "That can't be you. You died." Warren smiled again, but his smile cracked open his cheek, showing dark, burnt flesh underneath. "Death is only the beginning of tenure." The walls started to pulse, the lights flickered red, and the sound of screaming filled the room, but it wasn't theirs. It came from inside the walls, from dozens of trapped voices calling for help. Clara fell to her knees, covering her ears. "Make it stop, please." Jake grabbed her arm. "There has to be a way out." He looked around frantically. The windows were now bricked up. The only thing glowing was the projector. He ran to it, yanked the plug, and the screen went black. Silence. Then, a whisper right behind his ear. "You shouldn't have done that." Jake turned, but no one was there. Suddenly, Melissa gasped awake, her eyes wide and glowing faintly white. She stood up slowly, her movements stiff and robotic. "Melissa," Jake said carefully. She turned to him, her face blank, emotionless. "Professor Warren says, class isn't over yet." Jake stumbled backward as Warren appeared behind her, his burnt hand resting on her shoulder. "Good," Warren said, his voice echoing through the walls. "Now the real lesson begins." The lights went out completely, and something cold brushed Jake's neck. The room was swallowed by darkness. Jake couldn't see a thing, only the sound of his own breathing, loud and shaky, echoing in his ears. Somewhere to his right, Clara whispered his name. "Jake, where are you?" Her voice trembled like a child's. Then came a scraping sound. Metal against floor. Slow. Rhythmic. Jake froze. He turned toward the sound, but the air felt thick, like the darkness itself was pushing against him. A faint blue glow began to pulse from the corner of the room, flickering like a dying light bulb. That's when he saw it, Melissa standing perfectly still, eyes glowing bright white, holding one of the old metal pointers the professor used. She was dragging it slowly along the floor as she walked toward them. "Melissa," Clara said softly, her voice breaking. "It's me. Stop, please." But Melissa didn't stop. She tilted her head to the side, and when she spoke, it wasn't her voice, it was Warren's. "Sit down, class. You haven't finished the test." Jake pulled Clara back. She's not Melissa anymore. The lights flickered once more, and Professor Warren appeared again, standing by the blackboard. His skin was gray now, his clothes burned and tattered. The board behind him had words written in glowing red. Final exam, survival. Danny, who had been hiding behind a desk, suddenly screamed, "Leave us alone," and threw a chair straight at the professor. The chair hit him square in the chest, but passed right through him. Warren's body dissolved into mist, then reformed behind Danny. He leaned close to Danny's ear and whispered, "You failed." Danny's eyes rolled back, and he fell to the floor, motionless. Clara screamed and ran to him, shaking him, crying his name. Jake grabbed her hand, but she yanked away, her face twisted with terror. "We have to help him." Jake shook his head. "He's gone. We need to go, now." They stumbled toward the door again, and this time it creaked open just an inch, as if teasing them. But the hallway outside was pitch black, and faint whispers drifted in from it, soft, pleading voices saying their names. Jake took a deep breath. "On 3. 1, Clara whispered. 2, 3. They pushed the door open and ran into the hallway. The air outside was freezing. Every light in the corridor flickered blue, and old posters peeled off the walls as they sprinted past. Somewhere behind them, footsteps echoed again, slow, deliberate, matching their pace no matter how fast they ran. They reached the stairwell and froze. Standing at the bottom of the stairs were students, dozens of them, silent, unmoving, their eyes all glowing white. Jake's heart pounded. "No way, this can't be real." From behind, a deep voice said, "Class unity is important." They turned. Warren stood at the top of the stairs, holding a long piece of chalk in one hand. With every step he took, the chalk drew glowing red symbols in the air, leaving trails of smoke behind. "You are now part of the syllabus," he said, smiling that cracked, broken smile. Lesson 3, Obedience. The glowing-eyed students started moving toward Jake and Clara, their steps perfectly in sync, their faces blank. Jake grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall and swung it hard at one of them. It passed right through, leaving only a puff of cold mist. "Run upstairs," he shouted. They darted up the next flight, turning corners, doors slamming shut behind them as if the building itself was alive. Finally, they burst into the old library. Dusty shelves, broken lights, and a huge portrait of Professor Warren hung crooked on the far wall. Clara leaned against a desk, panting. "We're trapped." Jake looked around wildly. "No, there has to be something. He's connected to this place. Maybe if we destroy." He stopped. The portrait on the wall. The eyes were moving. The painted Warren turned his head slowly and smiled. "Knowledge is power, Jake. Don't you want to learn forever?" The shelves started shaking violently. Books flew open, pages tearing themselves free, swirling in the air like a storm. The words from the pages began glowing blue, forming a circle of light around them. Clara screamed as one of the books burst into flames, and a face appeared in the fire. It was Melissa's. "Join us," she whispered through the burning paper. "It's peaceful here." Jake's heart pounded. "You're not real." He grabbed the portrait off the wall and smashed it on the ground. The room exploded in blue light. The walls cracked. The shelves fell. A roar of voices screamed, echoing through the library. And then, silence. When the light faded, Clara and Jake were lying on the floor. The room was empty. No fire. No ghosts. Just the faint sound of the wind outside. Jake stood up slowly, dizzy. Did we end it?" Clara looked around, trembling. I don't know." They walked out into the hallway. The lights were steady again, no flicker. The air felt normal. But as they reached the exit door, a piece of chalk rolled slowly across the floor and stopped at Jake's shoe. He bent down to pick it up. It was cold. And then he heard a whisper, quiet, almost friendly. "See you next semester." Jake froze. The chalk cracked in his hand. The exit door creaked open by itself, and faint blue light spilled out into the night. They stepped outside, but the moment they crossed the threshold, the school bell rang behind them. Ding, ding, ding. It was 3 a.m., the time the horror always begins.